Welcome to this MeasureU workshop. Today we are helping you answer the question, how do tag managers work? My name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. I'm the co-founder here at MeasureU.com and have been building my own measurement muscles since way back in the day. In this case, 2011, which is kind of right before Google Tag Manager actually became a thing. So technically been teaching this before that. I'm really just focusing on strategy. So how to help marketers, agencies, and teams use measurement to automate better results. To actually get more done with a whole lot less. These tools are pretty important. When you know how to think about them, they're a lot easier to use. And so that's sort of my specialty. And of course, the measurement marketing framework is one of the ways that we teach that. Now, in this training, with all MeasureU trainings, we always consider the one thing, meaning what's one new takeaway you can get. Maybe it's a new tactic. Maybe it's a new way of thinking about something. Maybe it's a new way that you just heard something where now it just makes sense. Your goal in this workshop is to get one new thing, practice that, then come back, watch this workshop, and you'll pick up another new one thing because you've learned a little bit more. You've got a little bit measurement muscle. And that is how we build skills without getting overwhelmed. Now, before we begin, let's cover that measurement marketing framework. Remember, there are 3 simple steps to this process. We plan, we build, and we launch. But why are we using measurement? Because most marketers are marketing in the blind. We're trying to have our marketing produce revenue and profits. Well, how can measurement help us to do that? First, we plan. Asking the right questions, gathering the information, which is very important. This is where tag managers start to come in here. And finally, knowing what actions we're going to take based upon the answers we're about to get. Once we've got our measurement plans into place, we move into the build, actually using tools like Google Analytics or Tag Manager, Looker Studio, and we're making sure that our results are measured properly. We make sure our traffic is tagged properly, and we make sure to set up our tools in such a way so that the traffic naturally ties to the results. We know the story of which traffic causes which results and ideally why. Then we use our measurement. That's where we're listening to the conversation that's happening between the users and the websites. Then we are matching against our forecast, which we should already have in place that says, here's how this marketing was supposed to work. And when we compare and contrast between the two, we're going to see where we're hitting the mark and where we are not. That tells us where to optimize. In other words, where to focus our resources in the area that's most likely to move the needle. So that is the MeasureU measurement marketing framework. And of course, this is where Tag Manager actually comes into play because we're going to need Tag Manager eventually to gather very specific information to answer very specific questions so we can optimize with very specific actions. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive in, talk about some measurement basics to ease us into this conversation. Now, there are really just 3 simple steps that no matter what, every single measurement system has. 1, we have to collect the data. 2, we have to store the data somewhere. And 3, we have to build a report about that data so we can actually use and interact with it. So collect, store, and report. It's pretty simple. Every single system out there uses this. If you just used Google Analytics, well, you are collecting the data. Google Analytics does that on its own. It stores the data in its own database, and it builds reports. It comes with reports to do that. So yes, you could use one single tool to collect, store, and report. But here's the challenge. In those reports of Google Analytics, maybe they're not so friendly to everybody. Maybe you're a numbers person, and that's awesome for you. You love data tables. But maybe you're not a numbers person, and you just need to see what actions to do next. And sometimes looking at a bunch of numbers isn't really useful. So instead, you might use a tool like Looker Studio to build your reports. This is exactly what we do. When I'm looking at my reports for my team, when I'm guiding MeasureU, we don't look at Google Analytics all that often. We look at the reports in Looker Studio that come from Google Analytics. We use that as our source. Now, Google Analytics, there's another thing called BigQuery that you may have heard about. This is where the first-party data and being able to own your own data and everything else comes from. Well, that's where you store. That's a way you might enhance how you store things. Again, you would never start here, but eventually you grow into this, and this is kind of where we are. So our database connects to Looker Studio, and that's where we get all of our reports. But what about those collections? Well, Google Analytics does a pretty good job of collecting some things like page views, and if they scroll to the bottom of the page, or if they submitted a form, if they watched a YouTube video that was on your site, that sort of stuff. But it's not great at every single behavior, and that is where Tag Manager comes in. So Tag Manager allows you to level up the ability to collect specific behaviors, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this workshop. Now, there are really 4 big giant benefits of using a tag Manager. One is you've got a single source of truth collection point. So when a page view occurs, do this, or when a lead occurs, do this, or when a purchase happens, do this, right? So you teach Tag Manager what you mean by page view or lead or purchase. And once you set it up, it now knows that behavior forever, and you don't ever have to do it again. And if for whatever reason your purchase signal changes later, you change the one thing in Tag Manager and everything else fixes itself, which is awesome. So you've got that. Multiple destinations. So what happens when that purchase signal comes through? Well, once you tell Tag Manager, here's what a purchase signal looks like, and you teach it that, then you can say, go tell Google Analytics that a purchase occurred, and so I can have my e-commerce reports. And you can say, go tell Facebook a purchase occurred, or Meta, right, or Instagram, whatever it is that you're using. Google Ads, go tell Google Ads. Oh, why don't you go tell Microsoft Clarity so I can measure the conversion there? So you have this one single source of truth. So when a page view happens, or when a purchase happens, or when a lead happens, go do these multiple things. So now one behavior, one collection point triggers a whole bunch of other stuff to happen, which is pretty cool. It helps you leverage your measurement. And they're all getting the same source of truth at the same time, which is nice. They're all getting the exact same purchase information, the exact same details, all at the same time, which means everything is in one place. So if Meta is not reporting properly, and you're getting different results from Meta than you are maybe Google Ads, if you use a Tag Manager, you're less likely to have that happen because Tag Manager is telling everybody the same thing at the same time. And if something is a little tweaked, or you've got to kind of debug something in the Tag Manager container, they call it, you go to the one place where you can adjust all of your measurement. It's incredible as a tool. Finally, it is simple to learn, but there are some moving parts and pieces. And that's why we say it's simple to learn, but it is not naturally intuitive. Like, I'm not going to be able to just open up Tag Manager, give it to you and be like, go, because you're just going to sit there. I did for about 6 months until I figured out the stuff that I'm about to talk about here. So that's what we're going to move into now, is Tag Manager, making it easier for you to use, because you're going to really understand the basics of how it works and how to think about it in the most important ways, so you can start taking action with it. All right, let's go ahead and talk about how it works. And then we're also going to talk about the parts and pieces of Google Tag Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and handy dandy bring up our draw.io diagram here. This is a typical website. And what I sort of have up here is, like, let's say we've got the MeasureU website, and we have what we call tags. So Meta Pixel would be a tag. When Meta gives you the script and you put this script on your page or use a plugin or something like that to do it, you're really just putting that script on your site. That's a tag. But then Google Ads has their own tag, and Google Analytics has their Google tag, and TikTok's got their tag, right? Their pixel script. Microsoft Clarity has theirs, and it goes on and on and on. And all of a sudden you've got all of these different tags that are on your site. Now, this doesn't look that complex, and to be honest, it really isn't, but this isn't what's happening. This is. So you have Meta Pixel that's on there, and you've got that one pixel script, but that script's doing a lot of work. It fires when there's a page view that's happening. It fires something different when a lead happens. You have to teach it and adjust that. It fires something completely different when a purchase happens, right? Same pixel script, but it's doing different things. So you have to set it up in different ways at all these different stages for all these different behaviors. Oh, and by the way, we're doing that for Google Ads. Oh, and by the way, we're doing that for Google Analytics. And yes, for TikTok, and for Microsoft Clarity, and for whatever else we have. Pretty soon this becomes really hard to manage. And this is where a tag manager comes into place, because all these different tags that are happening, all these different things that are going on, you sort of have to go, okay, Meta Pixel, how do I do it for Meta? Google, how do I do everything for Google? Google Analytics, how do I do everything for this? And it just goes on and on and on. A tag manager operates a little differently. So we're going to bring this up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a tag manager container together. And I'm going to show you just how different you can use, or how differently this tool works, so you can think about it in a much more useful way. So instead of the tag manager saying, okay, well, I'm going to set Meta up and we're going to drag Meta in here and Google Ads and everything else, we don't do that. So what we do instead is you tell Tag Manager, all right, I need a page view. When a page view happens, I would like you to tell Meta about that page view. And I'm just going to drag this over here. So we're going to do that. I would also like you to tell Google Ads a page view has happened. I would also like you to tell Google Analytics a page view has happened. et cetera, right? So I'm just going to expand this out a little bit so we can give ourselves a little bit of room. There's our TikTok. And then finally, Microsoft Clarity for the win. By the way, if you're not using Microsoft Clarity, it is an amazing tool. Definitely worth checking out. Kind of a newer kid on the block in the analytics market, but they've done an amazing job with that. Heat maps, scroll maps, all that fun stuff. So now we have our page view that actually tells all these other platforms what happened when this occurs. And then we can do the same thing with the lead, so we can say, okay, hey, when the lead happens or when a purchase happens. And so what it starts to look like is this. So everything comes into play. We have our nice little system here that says, okay, when a page view happens, go tell all these platforms. And you can adjust this. You can say a page view happens, tell these platforms, but not these other two. You can do all of that. For sake of simplicity, we're going to keep it like this. When a lead occurs, also tell those platforms. Oh, and when a purchase occurs, also tell those platforms. And so you can really start to see how much more organized and simple things are when you're using a tag container, because all this stuff, all these individual components that you would otherwise have to sort of manage and look at and adjust and fix and coordinate, all that goes away. And so what will happen, as I zoom out here just a little bit, is our website, instead of having a bunch of different tags on it, you do one script, what they call the tag manager container, and that goes onto your site. So then, instead of having a measurement system of all that different stuff that you have to try to follow around and find out where it is in the code, and if it was hard-coded or put in through a plugin or some sort of other app, you go to the one place, which in this case is Google Tag Manager we're going to talk about. Of course, it's free, right? Another huge benefit. But you go to the Tag Manager container, and in this container is where you manage everything. It's a completely different platform, which I'll show you in just a moment what that looks like. So that is how tag managers work. You sort of think about what they call these triggers. We're going to get into parts and pieces here in a moment, but you think about the behaviors you're trying to collect. I'm trying to collect when somebody does a page view, when somebody becomes a lead, when somebody purchases. I want to collect that information. That's what Tag Manager does really well. When they scroll halfway down the page and have 50% or maybe have been there for 50 seconds. Things like that you can do. So compounded behaviors you can collect with Tag Manager. Really, really good behavioral measurement things. That's where Tag Manager really excels. So when you collect those different behaviors, then go do this with the different platforms. So again, single source of collection point, and then multiple platforms can be told at once, makes things a whole lot simpler to think your way through. Now, the parts and pieces, how this works. There are triggers, there are tags, and there are variables in Tag Manager. And this is how I sort of think about it. The trigger is when the thing happens. So when the behavior that you're trying to measure happens, do this thing. The thing that you want to do is the tag. Go tell Meta, go tell Google, go tell Microsoft Clarity. And then the variable is information they're going to need to do that. So again, the trigger is when the thing is supposed to occur. Oh, got a little closing parentheses there. My little OCD popping up. There we go. So there's the trigger of when the behavior happens. Tell this thing, do this thing when this happens. This is the tag part. And then here's the information that this tag or a trigger might need in order to get the job done. So what does that look like in kind of this strategy system here is page view would be an example of a trigger. So when a page view happens, that's the trigger, that's the when. Go tell Google Analytics, we fire a tag, go tell Google Analytics. There's another tag with Meta. There's another tag with Clarity. And this is why they call them tags in Tag Manager. So each sort of platform has their own tag. And then here's the information this tag or this trigger will need. So in this case of Google Analytics, it needs your measurement ID. It needs to know what account it needs to send it to, which property. The Meta, right? Meta is going to need its pixel ID. It needs to know what your pixel is so it can organize everything properly. Microsoft Clarity has what they call a project ID. So it would need that information as a variable so that it knows where to go store that information in Microsoft Clarity, right? So that's all this really is. So the trigger is the when, what to do, and here's information you might need along the way with the variables. Now, what this actually looks like in real life, and this is kind of where I'm going to kind of give you the overall tour very quickly here, and then we're going to wrap it up so we don't go too far down the rabbit hole, because remember, this is just an introduction to the platform. This is Google Tag Manager, and you can see you've got tags, you've got triggers, you've got variables. Remember, tags are the what, triggers are the when, variables are information it's going to need along the way. And I'm going to show you what that looks like as a combined thing here. So there's our tag of Microsoft Clarity. You can already see our triggers also listed here. So when all pages, this is basically a way of doing page views. So whenever a page view happens, that's what this means. So when I click into here, I'm going into the tag. And this is a very, very simple tag, but I want you to see it because I think it's helpful to understand that Tag Manager does not have to be complicated. You can see some of our stuff is incredibly complicated, but some of our stuff is not. It doesn't have to be. And we grow into that complexity. You don't start with the complex. You start with the simple. So a Microsoft Clarity, if you wanted to set up Microsoft Clarity using Tag Manager, you basically have this all pages trigger and you say, when a page view happens, go tell Microsoft Clarity that a page view happens. By the way, this is the MeasureU ID for the project ID for MeasureU. So we give that ID specifically to Microsoft Clarity, and then it automatically then goes into our Microsoft Clarity account. That is how this works. It is very, very simple. So pop quiz, what's the trigger? When should this happen? Well, the trigger's down here, when all pages happen. So when the page view occurs, that's what that says, page view. So it's when a page view happens. What do we want it to do? Well, that's the tag. The tag, what, go tell Microsoft Clarity. Now, the information, the variables, a little harder to spot, but they're in here. These are the things that it's asking you to set up. And you can do all sorts of different options and make it more advanced and more complex. Again, that's what I love about Tag Manager. It grows with you as you understand more and more about how to use it. So you can start very, very simply, get good enough to get going, and then you can come back and make it later with more advanced things. So in this case, the variable, the information that it needs is here, which is the project ID for Microsoft Clarity. Now, we can do some more complicated ones. Again, you've got, in this case, we set them up for video. We've got when they initiated, but look at this. This is actually when they click on the Eyes in the Journey report. Here's when a certain page view occurs. Here's when they scroll at all of these different points. This is a trigger that says when they complete a Vimeo video. This one is for progress points through YouTube. So you can do all sorts of stuff, including compounded behaviors. Here's a trigger that says when they scroll halfway down and they have been there for 30 seconds, then go tell, in this case, Google Analytics, that this event has occurred. And we set that up. Now I'm going to open this up and then we'll finish out for here. This is a little more complex, so don't worry if you don't fully understand this. I'm going to talk you through it. What are the triggers? Well, they're down here. When this thing happens. So when this compounded behavior happens of scroll of 50% and they've been there for 30 seconds, what do we want it to do? Go tell Google Analytics. Now, what information does it need? This is where I'm going to edit this and open it up a little bit. It needs to know what the event name is. That's a variable. It needs to know what the ID is. That's a variable. And this is sometimes how you'll see them listed. More as you learn Tag Manager, you'll learn what this means. This basically just substitutes the value in there of that ID. But that's just a variable. We're just giving it the information it needs in order to get the job done. That's it. So you've got your trigger, you've got your tag, and you've got the variables within the tags and triggers to help along the way, right? So that's all this is. So at the end of the day, hopefully this has helped you simplify what Tag Manager is, why you might want to use it. Remember, it is a free tool from Google. It is incredibly powerful, and it helps us answer more specific questions so we can take more specific actions when it comes to optimizing our sites. Again, grow into the complexity of this. Start simple. Very important to keep it simple, and then you grow into the complexity. So at this point, my question for you is, what's your one thing? Was there something that you kind of went, I never really thought about like that? Or, I didn't realize it could be this simple. Whatever it was, write that down, practice that, then go in the Tag Manager, build some skills, play around with it a little bit. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be good enough to get going. Then you can come back as you build measurement muscle with that tool and pick up another new one thing. Watch some more MeasureU training, whether on YouTube or in the MeasureU community platform. Speaking of, you are, of course, invited to join that. We have our community memberships that are available for you. I believe they are currently free, so be checking those out. That might change, but check those out. They are currently free. And I believe at the time of this recording, they will also be that. But again, you can scan the QR code or learn more by going to measureu.com/workshop, and that'll take you to MeasureU, where you can learn about the community that we have back there, and you can join that. Hopefully that is still free. So take advantage of that. And even if it's not, you still have other options. So as you want to unlock courses or take additional trainings, things like that, MeasureU is one of those platforms that grows with you as well. So you can get started for as little as nothing, free. And you can take advantage of the tools and everything else we have back there. And then eventually, if you do decide that we can help you out with additional training, whether it's our live training courses or the existing courses that we have set out, or the workshops, or the Measure Lives, or the Measure Labs, or the Measurement Mastermind, or everything else that we have back there, check it out over at MeasureU.com/workshop, or of course, the QR code on your screen. With that, thanks again for joining us for How Do Tag Managers Work? We'll see you on the next workshop.